We've all heard the story that employees don't leave jobs, they leave leaders. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how you can be a leader that employees stay for. Today's episode is all about employee retention. From EngageMint, I'm David Millay, and this is Flip the Switch. The cost of losing an employee is often way steeper than we realize. Optimistic estimates say that 6 to 9 months of an employee's salary is what it's costing you. But for more senior roles, it could be costing your company upwards of 200% of that employee's salary when they leave. We're talking about resources spent recruiting and interviewing a replacement, not to mention the year plus that it's going to take for the replacement person to become really competent in that new environment. Now, our guest today understands this as well as anyone. Clint Pulver is the employee retention expert, and he travels the world helping transform companies like AT&T, McDonald's, Toyota. He's even worked with the NBA. Now, Clint is a professional keynote speaker, musician, pilot, and he's the author of the book, I Love It Here: How Great Leaders Create Organizations Their People Never Want to Leave. His book is available on Amazon, Audible, all the usual marketplaces. And that's how we found Clint today. So his book is really interesting, and I definitely encourage you guys to check it out because it's based on his research of interviewing more than 10,000 millennial employees to get unscripted anecdotes and real feedback as to what makes them tick, what makes them thrive, what makes them stay in an organization. And in our conversation today, we're going to unpack some of our favorite principles from his research. And if you want to learn more, definitely go check out the book. It is incredible. Okay, without further ado, I want to jump into this conversation with Clint where we discuss practical advice that you can implement in your organization to retain employees longer and make a real impact as a leader. Everyone, Clint Pulver. Clint, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
I'm hyped to have you on. We are going to dive deep into all things employee retention, leadership, coaching, mentorship. So I want to talk about your nickname here. You've got this Undercover Millennial program that you created, and that's kind of how you're known. So talk to us a little bit about the program so people can get a context of what you've been doing the last however many years, 7 years or so.
How it all started is I was a part of a mastermind group, and we were with a bunch of other CEOs and executives, and we were in New York. We were talking about the hustle and bustle of these different brands and how they were creating momentum in the world. And this one specific leader just talked about how good he was crushing it with his employees and how the way he managed today was the same way he managed 20 years ago. And he just constantly gets results. And it's just amazing. And I'm a millennial. Okay, that's the generation I was born in. And I looked around and everybody was about my age or even a little younger working in this store. It was an actual retail store full of sports merchandise, from gloves to mitts to bats to everything. I just thought to myself, I said, I wonder if his employees would say the same. And so I thanked him for his time. We ended the conversation. I had 45 minutes to kill until we needed to be to the next place. So I casually walked up and looked similar to how I look today. I have a backwards hat on, wearing a hoodie. Walked up to the first employee and as a customer, I said, I'm just curious, what's it like to work here? And the employee kind of got quiet and started to look around, felt like an illegal drug exchange. He said, honestly, dude, I hate the job. I hate it. I can't stand it, man. We're all literally cogs in a wheel. Feel appreciated. I don't even think my manager knows my name.
No way.
I'm sitting there. Okay, maybe this dude's had a bad day, or we've got a leader that is so disconnected from the reality of what's going on in these employees' lives that there's just something's up. And so just innately out of curiosity, I went to the next and the next. And in this 45-minute span, I interviewed 6 of his team members. 5 out of the 6 of his employees said they would not be working for that guy at his store in less than 3.5 months.
Wow.
And that was the moment. That was the moment when I realized in the most significant way firsthand, the perception of leadership versus the reality of the employee experience is usually night and day different. Why? Because there's really no incentive for an employee to go up to a boss and say, hey, listen, Doug, I think this could help you. Every time we win as a team, you take all the credit. And then every time we lose as a team, you blame everybody else. Happy Tuesday, Doug. They don't tell you that. There's no incentive for them to tell you that. So instead, what do? They just leave. They leave, or worse, they mentally check out and then stay in your organization.
Yeah.
I realized that because of my age and because of the environment of this little like psychological safety moment of being a potential hire or just being a customer, many people were willing to open up to me in a way that they wouldn't do on a survey. They would never do on a one-on-one management meeting, but they would to another millennial. And that was I started the Undercover Millennial program. It's
Incredible.
now turned into a business, and I've done it for the last 6 years. We've worked with now we're at 220 organizations, and I've interviewed over 12,000 employees undercover. And that's
That
what
is
led
so
to the book
wild.
and me writing the book called I Love It Here. Became a #1 national bestseller, not because of me, but because, again, I think of the perspective that it captured.
Yeah.
It gave insight to helping leaders understand the gaps and some of the things that they might not always see in leadership.
It's incredible that this perception break that we talk about. I mean, I think you really can see it in McKinsey studies or some of these big consulting companies. They'll give, I think some of the ones that have come out in the last couple of years have been around like why employees are quitting versus why leaders think that they're quitting. They're always off. They're always off. And outside of pay, like your leader is usually the number one thing or the number two thing behind pay. And it's incredible that we know that to be true, yet so little time in organizations is focused on leadership development. It's like we take the leader that he's performing well, she's performing well. Now we're going to put them in charge of people because they'll help other people perform well. And those are totally different skill sets. So I'm fascinated to dive into some of the trends and the principles that you've created after interviewing over 12,000 different millennial employees over the years.
It's been a ride, man. And it's been so cool, again, to then present the research to these organizations in an eye-opening perspective, because we would have hidden cameras. I had a little pen, I had a lapel camera, and we would film it. There's one thing to talk about it and say, hey, here's a study or research shows. But when they're seeing, because we would block out the employee's face, we would change their voice if needed. We always, #1 was employee privacy to make sure that the employee was protected. But if it was a large enough organization to where we could protect their identity and bring the truth and the trends in a way that was just empowering, the goal was never to shame. Like many of the things that we found undercover were very affirming and good and positive, but it was extremely powerful to hear their own people, their own team talking about how they felt, what they were seeing, and the trend. It was very moving, very powerful.
That's so much more powerful than a survey result or something like that. Being able to see and hear your people talking, it's another level.
Well, yeah, it is. And again, 62% or something of people that answer or take a survey, they never answer honestly anyways.
Right.
They're always worried what's on the other side of the survey. I'm going to give a safe answer, Bruce. You're awesome. Keep it up, because I don't want to talk about this ever again.
And not to go too deep on the surveys, but I mean, that is one thing that we always advise our clients when we're doing surveys. I'm like, put a certain amount of stock into the results of this, but not a ton. Because if you're doing, especially if you're doing quantitative stuff, it could have been snowy that day and they had a tough time getting out of the car and they had ice on their windshield. So it's going to be 2 points lower than what it would have been. But you're getting actual context and stories doing it this way through qualitative data.
Correct.
I love it. Let's dive into some of the principles that you've created and you found through all these interviews, which you really do a great job highlighting in your book. I love it here. One way that we could flow this interview is just like, maybe we just go through the different principles and dive deep onto a few of them. So we can list them all. Do you want to list them all, or should we just like pick some ones and then go deep and let people go read the book if they want all the principles? How do you want to do it?
Yeah, I think they can definitely check out the book. I think let's highlight a few of the things. Let's talk about like mentorship versus management. I think that would be really rad.
Let's do it.
Should we dive in there? Start there?
Yeah, let's jump in there. You've got 4 different kind of types of managers, and mentor manager is the best one. But let's talk about mentoring versus managing.
So what was really interesting is I was going in, and oftentimes we say people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses, and leadership's the #1 reason why people leave. And there's some big context around that. And that is for sure, there's definitely some valid truth to that. But what was really interesting, usually when we talk about leadership, we either look at leadership or management. Leadership or management. The traditional view of leadership is you're the CEO, you're the executive, you're the visionary. You talk about the direction that needs to take place, and we got to get from point A to point B to point C. Let's move. I'm leading a group to a destination. That's traditional leadership. Management is about making sure there's no holes in the ship, right? How do we get there effectively, efficiently, faster, save more money, time? Management. Mentorship was a unique thing because that is the thing that employees talked about. When an employee hated their boss, they always talked about a manager, even a leader in some regards. But when an employee loved their job, they talked about a mentor. It was very specific in how they define that, because mentorship is really interesting because mentorship has to be earned. You can't just give yourself the title of mentor. No, you're chosen that. You cannot become the mentor until the mentee invites you into their heart.
Yes. Yes.
And that is why it became so powerful. When you became the entity, the leader or the manager, that people actively chose you. Because of you, got to live a better story. You became the advocate, not just the developer. Bingo was the magic. And a big part of what I wanted to highlight in the book, mentorship versus management.
It's huge. And I think back to my Disney days. So slight tangent. I created a group with my friend Elizabeth. We created this thing called Disney Young Professionals. It's now Disney Emerging Professionals. And it was basically like young salaried millennial leaders that had been promoted out of an hourly role where we were buddy with people. And now we're suddenly controlling their performance reviews or delegating tasks to them. And so we were trying to figure out how to make this jump. And so we created this group called Disney Emerging Professionals, which is what it is now. And by the time I left the company, it was like 1,500 employees strong. And we were consulting back to the company. But one of the things that Disney always had a challenge with back then, and were trying to task us with, was they're like, we have an issue with mentors. We're trying to figure out how to create a better mentorship program. And they highlighted that key thing. They're like, because we've tried the matchmaking deal where we say, oh, you might be a good fit with this person. But that just doesn't work because of something that you just said. The mentee has to choose the mentor. And I've never thought about it that way. So I guess let's maybe start to unpack some of this stuff. How do you create a culture where you've got more mentors? And why are mentors more successful than other people?
Yeah, I think it's really important to outline, and I think this is in but the 4 different types of managers that we saw. I could always tell when I would go undercover into an organization whether the manager was effective or not, successful or significant, because again, there's a big difference between those two things based off of these 2 variables. Number 1 was standards. Number 2 was connection. Standards and connection. So the standards would be like the responsibilities of the job, safety, I need you to show up on time, our core values, getting things done, profitability. Those are standards that we have in an organization, things that we can trace. The intangible side of good leadership, management, mentorship is the connection piece, right? Helping people to feel seen, heard, understood, realizing that people have a life outside of work. And how do we connect in a way where they feel like those things are there? Passion, purpose, again, the things that we can't trace. They're the intangibles. So those are the 2 variables that we will use as we talk about these 4 different types of managers. The first manager that I found in almost every organization was the removed manager. So this is the manager that's very low on standards, very low on connection. They're just burnt out. Like they should have stopped managing 20 years ago.
Yep.
Like they're kind of in the organization, but they're not into it. Like they're just done. And so what did this create in the employee experience? Disengagement. They became removed too. They could care less about the standards that the manager had. They could care less about the connection because they're removed. There was no need for any of that. So they became removed themselves. The second is the buddy manager. This was the manager that was very low on standards, but high on connection. This is the manager that's, I just want everybody to love me. We love you. I just want you to love me. This is a safe spot and you're just my friend and we're a family. These are the managers. They would go play Xbox on the weekends with the team. And then Monday morning, they're like, okay, listen, guys, we got to do better. And then everyone's on the team's, Doug, I just saved you in Call of Duty on Friday. What? Now you're the manager? Like it didn't work. So what it did is it created a sense of entitlement. This is where the employees became more of the boss than the boss because he would rather be liked more than he's respected. Number 3 was the most common is the controller. This is the controlling manager. High standards, low on connection. It's the approach of my way or the highway. No, you want me to love you as an employee? No, smile, I give you a paycheck. Tomorrow's going to be worse. With that kind of mentality of
Oh,
just
yeah.
command and control. I'm not here to be your friend. Just do your job. Do your job. We're not going to have a problem.
Yep.
What did this create? Almost every time, rebellion, pushback. This is where you had a manager that was going head to head with every single employee instead of going shoulder to shoulder. And sometimes that manager did get results, right? That fear-based manipulation, those scare tactics. Do your job, I'll fire you. I've got a whole long line of people that want your job. I'll fire you. Easy come, easy go. Sometimes that did work. But the problem with that is the results never lasted. Any smart business owner knows that you're in this game to win, but you're in this game to win consistently. Consistency. And that requires consistent engagement, a consistent workforce that remains loyal over a period of time, right? Hope is, how do we take an employee from 6 months to 6 years? That's a win in many industries, especially the industry of people that are listening here. But this leads to number 4. And this was the magic of all of the research. And I, of course, call them the mentor manager. This is the individual that was high on standards. They were also equally as high on their ability to connect. And what did this create in the equation? Respect. These managers, these leaders, they were not always liked, but they were respected. They understood the significance of connection. They led with the connection because they knew, and I think this is a really important part to remember, no significant loyalty in our current workforce is ever going to happen without significant connection. Why? Because every employee right now is asking you as the boss, let me know when this organization, let me know when your standards, let me know when your objective, let me know when that gets to the part about me. And sometimes as managers, we hear that and we go, well, those entitled little shining stars in my life. Let me know when it gets to the part about me. And I would say my research and what we found that it's not so much about entitlement as it is about just good business. It's about bringing connection and a sense of humanity back into the workplace, becoming the person that people choose you because you're the mentor in the story. And so I think it's worth asking, what manager are you? And what manager would your employees describe you as? Those 4 individuals.
That's where
Very
this
telling.
Yeah, that's where this disconnect in perception comes from. And to that point, if a manager's unaware of how they're being perceived, though, there's some questions that they might be able to ask to better tell, hey, am I a buddy manager? Am I a controlling manager? I doubt they're going to ask the question if they're a removed manager, but if they're a buddy manager or controlling manager, how do you tell? What are some questions that you could ask to see how you're actually perceived by your people?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for, I don't know as if you would ever want to, as a manager, sit down with someone and say, hey, do you feel like I'm removed? Am I a controller? Because again, most of the time, they're not going to tell you, especially if you really are the controller.
Right.
Or they're just not going to tell you. That's the whole problem. The goal is for you to decide as the leader how you want to be for that person. You have to decide, I want to be the mentor. I want to be the advocate. I've got to get to the part about them. We found if somebody achieved in the eyes of an employee, where an employee chose them, they said, yeah, you're the mentor. You're the person I'll stay late for. You're the person I want to just continue to work hard for because you're going to help me live a better story. Yeah. It's because they possessed these 5 C's. I call them the 5 C's of mentorship.
Okay.
And David, if you've ever had a mentor in your life, you chose the mentor because you have these 5 C's. So let's outline this because I think this is really important. Number 1, individual had confidence. Confidence was number 1. Confidence exudes trust. They were confident in themselves. They were confident that I can help you get from point A to point B to point C. They were confident in their communication. Confidence exuded that sense of, okay, they're worth trusting. They're worth leaning on. That there's someone that confidently can pull me through this. Second was credibility. What's your history? What's your background? What's your resume? How long you been doing this for? Okay, you're my boss. Have you ever been in my shoes? Do you know what it's like to serve hot dogs on a day where you're dealing with the worst customers in the world? Do you get that? And then the third C was competence. Employees, they want to mentor. They choose a mentor, not because you're a theorist, but because you're a practitioner. The greatest form of mentoring happened in a practitioner's type of a way, meaning if I came to you as a drummer, I've been a professional drummer for 24 years, I want to know, are you gigging on the weekends? Do you actually still play? Are you relevant, or are you just somebody that knows everything about percussion theory?
Yeah.
Right? There's a difference. Competency. Can you get in and competently teach and instruct and guide in a way that is relevant for the mentee? The fourth C was candor. Mentors, I love this. Great mentors have the ability to create relationships so strong that honesty could exist. I saw this time and time again because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not just all about connection. We also have a job to get done. There's safety protocols, there's standards. But the problem is, it's like the bank account principle, where you make deposits of trust with your people. You're either making a deposit or you're making a withdrawal. The problem is when you as a manager, you're trying to make the withdrawals and you've made no deposits of trust. So therefore the bank account is empty. And so that candid conversation could happen when you became the advocate in the story. You could have tough talks with people because they knew that you were on their side. You were with them, not just over them.
Yeah.
See that difference? And then this leads to the fifth C, and it's caring. The ability to just give a darn. Really care. Again, become the advocate, not just the developer. So confidence, credibility, competence, candor, and the ability to care. If people see that in you, you're setting yourself up for the opportunity to be the person they choose, to be the person that they like themselves best when they're with you. And that's what's winning.
Let me ask this question because I love these 5 C's of confidence, credibility, competence, candor, caring. I think about transitions a lot. And when I think about transitions from a leadership perspective, like maybe I've never led anyone before and I've suddenly been placed in a new leadership role. And I'm hungry for something like this to be able to better lead my people. I'm probably going to struggle with maybe credibility or competence because I've never done this before. So what advice would you give to people that are in a new leadership role or they've transitioned to a new industry where they are lacking one of those two pieces? How do they go about displaying those things to their people?
Yeah, so one thing that we found that great leaders did is they conducted what I called a status interview. It's not a stay interview. It's not an exit interview. It's a status interview because every employee has a status. Some statuses are healthy, some are unhealthy, some are pleasant, unpleasant. I feel joy here. I have passion, purpose, or it's full of toxicity. I'm burnt out. I'm stressed out. They all have status. My background is a lot in the medical field. I worked in the OR for a long time. And the doc, the orthopedic surgeon, would always call out and he'd say, "Hey, I just need a status update. Can you give me a status update on the patient?" Really what that doctor was asking for is tell me what the vital signs are reading. Like what's the heart rate, respiratory rate, body temperature, blood pressure? Those are your 4 vital signs that determine whether you're living or not. What we would do is we would then check the status. And after we checked the status, we treated the patient. We would treat them to improve the stat. And then after we treated them, what do you think we did? We rechecked the status. And we would continue that cycle until healthy stability was maintained long term. There's the age-old adage, David, of if you feed a man a fish, then you feed him for a day. You've probably heard that. Or, if you teach him how to fish, then you feed him for a lifetime. Every time I hear that dang story, I think, who said the guy wanted a fish? Like maybe the dude wants a piece of chicken. Like maybe he's a steak guy. You don't know. But yet you just assume that the guy wants a fish. My point is now more than ever, if a new, young, emerging leader walked into a role where they're feeling totally confident, credible, or even competent, one of the great things they can do is conduct a status interview with those that they lead right out of the gate. And it consists of these 3 questions. So first, you've got to create psychological safety. I always tell leaders to start with vocal praise. Sit down with an employee. It could be over a Zoom call. You could be at dinner. It could be in your office. And go to the All-Star and just say, "Doug, Sally, Becky, Katie, I just need you to know how much you mean to this organization." That's what this meeting is about. It's for me to tell you how great you are and what I see you becoming. So do that. Dedicate a good amount of time to creating that safety, and that the meeting is there to just simply praise them and to advocate for them. And then here's the 3 questions. Here we go. Number 1, ask them this. What can I do as your leader to keep you here?
Interesting.
Number
Okay.
two is I need to know what's getting in the way of your success in this company. And then number three, what can I do as your leader? What can I do to help you get
Love
those
it.
three? Extremely simple, but incredibly telling, because the reality, most employees are never asked those three questions unless it's in the exit interview. When
It's
employees are, I'm out, peace out. And then you go, oh my
it's
gosh,
too late at that point. Yeah.
can we do it? What can we do to keep, what can I do to make you more successful? And then it dawns on you and you're like, I should have asked these questions 6 months ago.
So tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like all three of these questions are very employee focused, not organization focused, not leader focused. Almost feels like this shift over the last 10 years or so where Simon Sinek, what's the purpose? What's your why as an organization? Getting everybody to buy into this larger why almost has gotten in the way here of us focusing on every individual employee that we have is an individual. So I guess what would your rebuttal be there if I say I'm a organization purpose focused leader? Like, why are we diving so much onto an individual employee's status in these meetings? What's your rebuttal there?
Because if you don't, that's like standing in front of a fireplace and saying, give me heat and I'll give you wood. Stupid. It makes no sense. No significant loyalty will ever happen without significant connection. And too many organizations right now are learning to get to the part about the individuals that make up their company instead of the company as a whole. And when they flip that, when they reverse that, and they remember, again, God, once I get to you, then we grow. Then there's the deposits of trust. Then I become the mentor in the story. We can have harder conversations. We can talk about purpose. We can talk about standards, but it's coming from a place of a full bank account where people choose you. They like themselves best when they're with you. Because here's the reality. We talk about the war over talent. The war's over. Talent won. The game's over. And you could literally throw a stone right now and hit an organization that is dying for good talent.
Yeah.
And if people can't grow in your organization, they will go and grow somewhere else. I promise. We talk about, we invest in our people and we're a people-first organization. Yeah, but would your employees say the same thing? And in my experience, that is not the case, unfortunately. And the organizations that are learning how to do that are not struggling with retention. Not just building a great business, they're building great people.
Mm.
And to me, my goodness, what a better story to live as an organization.
So we really got to start with developing individual employees, making sure that it's relevant, significant, and we're building great connections with them. Something that you talk about in the book is kind of difference between advocating and developing. And it's one of the lessons that you learned from your parents. So maybe dive in a little bit there into those lessons and kind of the difference between those two and the role that they play for us as mentor managers to better engage our individual employees.
Yeah, you mentioned my mother and my father. They are the best examples of this that I can possibly think of. My mom was a great manager in my life, still is to this day. High standards, all about like development. You get things done and we're going to grow you as a person. I'm going to grow you. Mike has always been a really good advocator in my life. It was always about, what do you need? How can we support this? How can we blow this up? How can we make this about you? Like, very good on connection. Now, remember, when we talk about the mentor manager, both are important. Both are needed. I was 12 years old, and I went to my mom and I said, Mom, I want a drum set. I want a drum set. We know your pots and pans could use a break. I want a drum set. And my mother was like, geez, you sure you don't want to play the piccolo? I'm like, come on, Mom, please. And being a really good developer in my life, she looked at me and she said, okay. She said, you want a drum set? Have you seen your report card? She's like, I'll tell you what, if you change your C's and D's, A's and B's, we'll talk about a drum set. You do better in school, we'll talk about a drum set. Okay, in an employee business format, that would be, oh, you want a raise? No, you need to produce more. You need to show up more on time. You need to be in the company for longer. Then we'll talk. Development. You got to develop first.
Absolutely.
My dad heard the whole conversation go down. He was in the other room, in the computer room. I go walking by, sad about the conversation with my mom. And as soon as I go walking by, my dad goes, whisper for me to come in. I said, listen, I heard you were talking to your mom. I told her, I said, Dad, I want a drum set. Please. And he was like, good man. And in my dad's computer room were all of his old CDs.
Mm.
And he reached down to the bottom shelf and he pulled out a CD by the band called Rush. And he said, Clint, this band, this drummer, his name's Neil Peart. He's going to change you. And then he handed me the CD and he said, listen to him. Listen how he plays. And I go walking away and then he goes, and he reaches down to the bottom shelf and he pulls out a CD by the band called Def Leppard.
There it is.
And he said, Clint, this drummer doesn't have two arms. He's got one arm and he shreds on the drums. And then he got really serious. He looked me right in the eyes and he said, Clint, if you learn how to play Pour Some Sugar on Me, I'll love you forever. And it's got a funny story of advocating versus developing. Both are important. My mom was very focused on school, grades, performance, where my dad was focused on I think if we can learn how to tap into both of those things, both were needed. My mom needed me to do better in school, but my dad realized that I had a dream. And if an organization can get to the part about an employee's dream, their heart, wants, needs, and desires inside and outside of the company, what a perfect combo.
I mean, this is not an easy thing to embody both your mom and your dad's styles into one person. This is not an easy task of being a mentor manager, but that's the point. That's why when organizations don't focus on leadership development and growing their leaders, and they just expect that this high performer is going to come in and be able to be this mentor manager, this ideal, it's not. It's something that you constantly have to be working at. Side note, on a tangent, I can't stop laughing at you calling it a computer room. I think that is the most millennial thing that we have, because I knew exactly what you're talking about. I'm like, there was always that one room, and that's what it was called.
Yeah,
it's the computer room.
It is so true. Such a millennial thing to say. Yes.
I want to dive into a different principle that you have here, and that is really encapsulated in this story from NASA. But the principle is, when you give your employees a sense of ownership over their job and their career, they feel more invested in developing their skills and the company's success, right? We want to take some of the pressure off of that mentor manager and empower and create an environment where our people want to get better. But why don't you tell the NASA story with the janitor and President Kennedy, and then we can go from there, because I think that's the goal.
It's a powerful story about helping people to not just see themselves as their job, but to help them to see themselves as an opportunity, possibility, again, something bigger than themselves. It's a very famous story, a very important story. The validity of this story is true. I actually just spoke for NASA 2 weeks ago and asked them about this story. President Kennedy came and visited the Space Center, and there was a janitor in the hall, and they were all there lining up, and he didn't know that he was the janitor, and he was sitting there and he was actually cleaning. And so Kennedy put together that, okay, he's probably the janitor. He didn't know his official title. He said, hey, it's nice to meet you. What do you do here? What do you do? He goes, I'm working to put a man on the moon, sir. That's what I do. And you think the title would be just, I'm a janitor, just cleaning the floors. I'm just making sure nobody slips and falls. Guy was a part of something bigger. He realized that, everything we do and everything we're pulling here, whatever organization, whatever position, whatever title, we're all working to put a man on the moon. And I love that story every time. If I could go in undercover and ask that question, whether it's a burger chain restaurant, fast food, retail, the sporting industry, it's not like I work concessions. I'm taking tickets. I'm the water boy. Like, it could change. Oh man.
It's a story that I think is Lee Cockrell from Disney. I mean, we would tell this all the time. It was in our Disney Institute repertoire of stories, where you would have the guy that's cooking popcorn in the park and go up and say, hey, what's your purpose here? What's your job? And he's like, I'm creating the nourishment for people. They're out in the parks all day. I'm filling up their bellies with the best popcorn they've ever had. And there's a larger sense of purpose. But I think there is this challenge though for managers, jobs aren't always available that are super interesting to employees. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges for managers, is handing over work to employees that they can actually take pride or significance in. So how can employees keep staff engaged when there aren't always projects that are super interesting?
Yeah, I think so. For example, and I wrote about this in my book with another, there was an education district that I went and did undercover research in, struggled with retention, teacher burnout like crazy. This specific principal She had lost in the course of a year 6 different janitors. Like a janitor, you're cleaning up messes and just from little kids all day, like kids with bad aim, like all day. That's your job. This principal, she realized for all of it in the past, she had not given anybody a sense of ownership. All she did was hire somebody to clean up messes. And so she decided with this specific janitor, who now is currently still with her to this day. This has now been 5 years since the time that I did the research. Still with the organization, still with the district. She went around and she asked every class and every teacher for all of the students to write a handwritten note telling the janitor how much he had meant in their lives. What they saw when they looked at the janitor, his name was Henry. And she went into this guy's, they had this janitorial closet where he had a desk, all of his cleaning supplies. He was sitting there filling out an order for new cleaning supplies. She walked in with 2 big books full of these beautiful, just the sweetest written notes. And she sat down. She said, I just need you to know that you don't clean floors here. I need you to know what the kids see when they look at you. And I just want you to read a few of these. And I'll never forget when she shared this story with me, how he just began to weep. Like he sat and he just, because he realized in that moment that he was a protector. He was the top guy in the whole school that led suicide prevention and anti-bullying efforts, because he was the guy that people talked to when they felt like they had nobody to talk to. He was the guy that people could look to as a protector and a help and a smiling face. And so he transformed it. And so I think, man, if a janitor of an elementary school can find a sense of purpose, why can't we do that in all of the other organizations and other positions? Whether you're changing tires, you're an engineer stuck in a cubicle all day. How can we create a job description?
Yeah.
How can we allow the customer to come in and to create a moment to say, hey, listen, you're a part of something bigger, even though you might not get that direct feedback, or might not be visible or always seen. How do we help people to still see, though, that it matters? I think if we took some time to really think about that, we'd have a few ideas that are worth considering.
I just keep coming back to you talking about really getting to know the individual employee first. I think that's where it comes in. Is think about, I'm picturing in my head, you have this Venn diagram, let's call it, where you've got the individual needs and the organization needs. And it's really about finding that Venn diagram, that circle in the middle of what is that overlap, and how can we as mentor managers continue to reinforce stories or videos and continue to bring it home of, hey, we're in it for the same thing, but I'm advocating for you and we're pushing to meet these standards of the organization at the same time. Not an easy thing to do, but that's kind of what comes to my head.
And even like bringing an employee in on a job interview, like someone that they might not have a most significant role, or there might not be a lot of depth there, but you go, hey, we're hiring right now. We've got a list of 7 candidates. John, we would love it if you'd come and sit in. Becky, we would love for you to come and sit in, and we need your help choosing these people. Like, that's a simple, very small thing. But again, it's giving them a little sense of ownership. Oh, they actually value like my ideas, my thoughts, maybe my perspective. My dad, I go back to my dad a lot. But I remember when we were driving home from church one day, and I was like maybe 11 years old.
Yeah.
And he stopped the car and he looked over and he said, "You want to drive? You want to drive the car?" And I was like, "You can't tell Mom. You want to drive?" Yeah. And so I got out of the car. I walked over. I sat in his lap. I could not reach the gas pedals, but my dad gave me the will and let me drive. I'll never forget that moment, because all of a sudden I saw the road in a whole different stop signs that I'd never seen before. I saw trees and the creek on the side of the road. Like, everything changed because my dad let me hold the wheel a little bit. How do we do that? How do we give the wheel to our employees and let them drive? Now, my dad wouldn't let me go into the ditch. He still had some control. He was still leading the direction. But in that moment, I felt like I was driving the car.
It's such a good story. I feel like that story almost leads us into one of another principle that I really wanted to hit on. And I know we're coming close up on time, but I had to hit on this one, which is you must let people do their jobs, but check in continually to see how they're doing and find out their status and what they need. Your dad didn't just give you the wheel and say, have at it. He was there
Yep.
checking in. So I keep struggling though, this balance between mentor manager of how do you check in? How do you give your employees the wheel, let them drive, but still check in without micromanaging and seeming like you're overbearing? What are some of your favorite tools or questions that managers can use?
I think honestly, like it's going back to that status interview.
Mm,
You routinely checking in and saying, what can I do to keep you here? What's getting in the way of success? Like an
yeah.
honest conversation. Because we tried it. The whole goal is to get employees to tell you how they really feel. And again, like it's so simple. Ask them. I have a job
Yeah.
because most managers can't ask or nobody will tell them because they haven't created an environment. They haven't become the mentor in the story where people would actually tell them. And I think over time, like this is a journey. This is not a quick fix. This is not something that just happens overnight. But I've always told leaders this, and I believe this. The coolest part about your job in leadership is that it matters. The hardest part about your job as a leader is that it matters every day.
Mm,
Consistency is king. How do your employees know that what matters to them matters to you? How do we consistently follow up? That I talk about a growth development plan in my book, and many leaders were good at doing this, growing people, not just employees. What matters to you? What are you going to do to get there? What am I going to do as your mentor, as your leader to help that be achieved? But then the key part of that was the follow-up date, the consistent conversations, the consistent feedback, the consistent communication. And I know every time I talk about this, there are managers, leaders listening to this going, yeah, nice idea, Clint. I just don't have the time. I don't have the time like to do that. Like, great idea, but like, I don't have the time. I have always told leaders and I've advocated for, because I saw every time in my research, most good leaders, they knew what they needed to do. But the most significant leaders were masterful at the things they needed to stop doing.
mm,
Most of you don't have the time because you're so dang busy with all of the things that come into the bucket of leadership. But yet, if people are first, if people are really this essential part of how do we, again, not stand in front of the fireplace and say, give me heat, then I'll give you wood. How do we contribute, give wood to the thing that's ultimately going to fuel our organization? If you're not willing to give them time, then have fun being a solo entrepreneur or be okay with the revolving door of turnover that's costing your organization thousands and thousands of dollars because you're just so busy. Many leaders have implemented what I call a to-don't list. We're really good at the to-dos. Why don't you start a to-don't list and just see the difference that it can make? And you maybe you're a senior executive and you're like, 7,000 employees, Clint. I've got 600 employees. I'm asking you to start with one. Just start with one. Who's the rock star? Who's the person that if they came to you next week and they said, I'm just out. Kenny, it's been a good ride. Rebecca, thanks for everything, but here's my 2 weeks. I got to take this opportunity.
mhm.
If they did that, it would put you in a hard spot. Go to those people and sit down and say, hey, I'm trying to do better and I need to know what I can do to keep you here. What's getting in the way of you being successful? And is there anything that I can do more of to help you? And if at the end of that, they go, nah, nothing, everything's good. Or if they're like, yeah, okay, glad you asked. You can give me a 20% increase and give me a big corner office, couple ski passes, free Cheetos, I'll stay. And then you go, I can't do that. Then at least it gives you the opportunity to look for variables. At the end of if nothing transpires from this, then at least you asked.
Right.
The key to significant engagement and retention always starts with the leader. It starts with you. And so focus there. I'm not asking you to do this with every employee and this impossible goal of doing this with everybody. Hey, can I end this real quick, David?
Yeah.
I was the kid.
I was gonna give you a thing to end on, but let's do it here. Go for it.
Okay. I was a kid in school when I was little. I always had a hard time sitting still. I still have a hard time sitting still. I would move all the time. And everybody, obviously, that was an annoyance. I got called the twitcher. I got called the tapper. I got sent to the principal's office because I just couldn't sit still. And I had one teacher one day who told me to stay after class. His name was Mr. Jensen. And I remember thinking, I'm getting kicked out of school as a 10-year-old. This is it. This is the end for me. The bell rang, class dismissed, everybody left, and it was just me and Mr. Jensen. And he sat me down. He said, listen, he said, you're the kid that's on the list. Like, you tap, you do it in my class, you do it in everybody else's. You don't sit still. He said, but I've watched you though. He said, it's crazy. You'll take a pen, you'll start writing with your right hand, and then you tap with your left hand. And then in the middle of the assignment, you switch the pen and you'll start writing with your left, and then you tap with your right. He looked at me, he said, I think you're ambidextrous. And I was like, no, I'm Presbyterian. He said, no. He's like, no, that's not what it means. He said, listen, I gotta know. He said, can you tap your head and rub your belly at the same time? And I gave it a shot and I could do it. And he smiled and he looked at me and he said, I don't think you're a problem. I just think you're a drummer. And he reached back in his desk and he opened up the top drawer and he reached inside and he took out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he created a moment that represented potential and worth, to the point that I saw it within myself. He was the first person in my life who really did that. And he put the sticks in my hands and he said, listen, here's the deal. I just need you to keep them in your hands and let's see what happens. Keep playing. And that was 24 years ago. And for 24 years, I've traveled the world as a professional drummer, and I played with Blue Man Group, Tim McGraw, Carrie Underwood. My whole college education was paid for because of music scholarships. Amazing things have happened. And I don't say that to go, oh, wow, good for you, Clint, or what a list of accolades. Saying that because of one leader who said no to a few things and decided to create a moment that represented possibility, hope, advocacy, and the reality for somebody to live a better story. And in doing so, my life was changed forever. That's what employees talk to me about. In all of my undercover research, never did one of the thousands of employees ever say, you know what, I love it here. I love this arena because we're just so good at time management. We're so good. We're amazing. Our meetings, we always start on time. I love it. That's not what they talk. Nobody said that. What they talked about were moments when a leader got to the part about. And can we do that every day? I think we can to some degree. Because again, the coolest part about leadership is that it matters. The hardest part is that it matters every day. So how do we become the Mr. Jensens? How do we become the people that when we're with them, they go, I like myself best. I get to become something more because I'm a part of you and your organization. You want to win on the war over talent? Be a Mr. Jensen.
That's a hell of a way to end it, Clint. Incredible message. And again, every leader can do this. It's not just at the organization head. It's not just with your executive team. No matter if you have a team of one, if it's just yourself, where you got a team of 10 people, 20 people, you can be that Mr. Jensen where you take the time to tie it to an individual. Clint, it's been awesome having you on the show, man. Where can people find you, follow along your journey, engage with you? You're putting out some good content. So where can people find you?
Yeah, all the social media platforms. And then obviously my website, clintpulver.com. And then they can check out the book. I Love It Here, anywhere books are sold.
We will put links to all those things in the show notes. Guys, go get the book. I Love It Here. It is awesome, especially if you're trying to figure out how to be a better leader, how to retain employees. You want to understand what your people are saying. Dive in and go ask them. Clint, thanks so much. And we'll talk to you soon. To everybody that was tuning in and listening, thanks so much. We'll see you later. Clint, go ahead. One more closing sentence.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor. And just keep being the best for the world. It's not about being the best in the world. It's about being the best for the world. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. See y'all later. Hey guys, before you head out, just wanted to say thank you so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. That helps more of your peers find the show as they search for ways to get better in their own roles. But this podcast is just a small part of what we do at EngageMint. In our normal day in the office, we're crazy focused on helping athletic departments and sports and entertainment companies generate more revenue by becoming more customer-centric. To see how we might be able to help your organization, visit engagementpartners.com to learn more. Download a free guide, check out our blogs and case studies, or schedule a call with us if you want to see how we can help with your particular objectives. Our goal is to help you create deeper connections with fans and generate more revenue. So when you're with us, hopefully you find a nugget or two that helps your cause.